I'd like to introduce Tom Arthey from Arthey Associates, who's based in Oundle. Tom is a long-standing supporter of the Society, and he's very kindly agreed to speak this evening to us, which is very pertinent. The title of his talk, which is The Diversification Dilemma. So over to you, Tom.
Charlie, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving up your evening to listen to me talk and hopefully give some insights into sort of diversification opportunities and some thoughts. I'm just going to share my screen, if it will allow me. Away. So just a sort of brief introduction. I won't sort of bore you for too long with the sort of overall statistics, but so in 18-19 year, over 65% of farming businesses had diversified from core farming activities to one extent or another, and that generated 740 million to the rural economy, up 6% from 17 and 18, and on average, diversification accounts for about 26% of a total farm business income. So it is a vital source of income for rural businesses, for farm businesses in particular. As you can see from this graph, historically, letting of buildings has been one of the most popular types of diversification, be that for conversion to offices, simple industrial storage, or workshops. Most farms have lots of buildings, quite often that are redundant from modern agricultural practices, and that has been the sort of the go-to for a lot of rural businesses. In terms of most other diversification sectors, processing and retailing, so that's sort of food and drink products. Sport and recreation would be things like outdoor gyms and exercise facilities. Actually, quite surprisingly, tourist accommodation, so holiday cottages and B&Bs, only account for around about 7% of all diversification opportunities. And then renewable energy, in particular the solar energy in the early 2010s, there was obviously the big rush to put solar parks up around the country, and so that accounts for just about 20%, and other renewables around 10%. So what to do when considering diversification opportunities, and I'm just going to run through some sort of tools that I use when looking at opportunities for my clients, and hopefully that will give you some indications as well as to how you may go about it. So the first sort of top tips, I suppose, that I would recommend to anybody is, question yourself, do you already produce a product that can be sold to the public? And by that, I don't just mean goods, goods such as sort of foodstuffs. We also mean services as well, be that an education facility, a potential holiday let, outdoor exercise facility, or maybe stables for letting for livery. Also look at your business as a whole. Don't just let diversification dictate how you run your core business. If farming is your core business, don't let diversification dictate what you do with your farming business unless that is the plan, to totally move away and let the diversified opportunities actually drive the sort of future of your business. And also, don't be looking to necessarily reinvent the wheel. Quite often people are trying to look for something that they can do differently to everybody else. Well, the answer may be right in front of you. Look at what others do and ask if that fits for you, and could you do it better? What can you do better? So the sort of factors that I would usually consider when asked to look at diversification opportunities, I sort of split it into three three different areas. One is the natural assets that you have on your farm, and the second is the man-made assets, i.e. what has been put up historically, and then thirdly the sort of personal factors to you, your family, and the people that would be involved in the diversification. So natural assets, they're sort of pretty obvious. They're the unmovables, the things like where you're located and your sort of connectivity to populations. Have you got easy access to those populations? And then also sort of crucially now, are you in an area where you have sort of good connection in terms of internet and phone signal? You know, if you're at the bottom of the valley and you never get any phone signal, it's not a suitable place to be putting a rural office, for example. Secondly, sort of environmental factors. Are you in an area where the climate and weather is sort of generally favourable for certain types of diversification? Do you have a sort of local, is the local landscape and wildlife something that actually the public would want to visit your farm for? In terms of the man-made assets, those are things like your buildings. Are they suitable for conversion? Where do they sit within the farm? Can they be separated easily, or actually are they an integral part of the farmyard, and unless you were ceasing farming altogether, it's just not possible? And also look at the sort of planning challenge that you might have in arranging a sort of conversion. Have you got suitable access, for example? Highways and access is you know, a very big part of any considerations. And in terms of the farming business, as I've already said, does the diversification fit with the farming enterprise? What are your unique selling points of the sort of project that you want to implement? In terms of personal factors, and this is sometimes perhaps overlooked, do you have the existing skill sets? Are you public facing? There's no point implementing a campsite if you hate the general public. So sort of consider within your family group or within the people that are going to be running this diversification, what fits to them, what time have they got available to dedicate to it. You know, often, especially in the first years, these are very time consuming, and have you got the time to give to the project that it deserves? And also, have you got the knowledge and skill sets to be able to implement it properly? Or if you haven't, do you know somebody that has? You shouldn't be afraid to work in partnership. Sometimes people think that they've got to do it all by themselves, but partnership is you know, actually a very good way to get things off the ground and work for everybody. And then lastly, in terms of the sort of legal and fiscal issues, that's sort of looking at things like, is the tax implications of the project going to sort of fit, and how can you sort of manage those liabilities accordingly? Can, for example, you implement a diversification if you're a tenant farmer? Do you need the landlord's consent? It's those sorts of considerations that all these need to be sort of thought about early on in the sort of concept stage. And what I often do, so this slide is all very colourful, but what I often do is sort of a matrix of sort of potential ideas that may be bandied around. And what I've done here is sort of just listed all of those sort of questions, and then put a red, amber or green box next to it, depending on the project type, depending on how important they are to that project working. And then what I also do is do an assessment of the farm. What does it sort of tick the green boxes on in terms of what it can deliver, and then you can sort of easily match up what are the projects that actually fit with your particular circumstance. So in this example, the more greens and ambers you have, the more the easier a project like that would be to implement. So obviously at the moment, one of the big questions we got is that we're living in this slightly sort of crazy time where everything's sort of not happening how it normally would. You know, there are obviously a lot of discussions at the moment as to the new normal, as the saying goes. And I think whilst it is far too early to be sort of prophesying about how trends are going to change, I have just sort of put down here a few sort of ideas. So, you know, rural tourism and staycations is clearly going to be one of the things that has already been on the rise and will continue to do so. I suspect for the foreseeable future. You sort of hear all the time about how people are sort of reluctant to get on planes and go on these sort of cheap package holidays. But that may mean that there is an increase in desire for long weekends and holidays in the UK. It's also sort of made people appreciate what's on their doorstep. The public interest in the environment and the outdoor space and healthy living is clearly going to increase as well. And that also sort of fits with the opportunity to sell products that have sort of local provenance and traceability. Also, I think sort of longer term, the way that the sort of working environment is changing is going to present opportunities to those looking to diversify. I think the really important thing is, you know, as I sit here this evening doing this presentation, you know, we're all relying on a strong internet connection, and connectivity is really going to be a key part of sort of diversification opportunities going forward. But also there's flexibility around working, and it sort of comes to mind that those holiday lets may also be more attractive if there is the opportunity to have office pods, so that parts of the family can go away and the mother or the father can still continue to work, given that they don't need to be in the office quite like they would have done pre-COVID. And also, if there aren't going to be the sort of central London offices, there's potential opportunity for further venues to be created that allow teams to get together in wide open spaces. The one thing that a lot of farms often have is large buildings where you can socially distance and not all be crammed in. So that's something to be looked at. But as I say, it's still very early days to know how sort of working and living trends will change as a result of COVID, if indeed they will. But you know, I think there's lots of commentators far more in the know than me that are suggesting they will. Also, just sort of considering the farmers as its sort of natural asset. Most farmers are already practicing carbon sinking, whether they realise they are or not. And I think this is certainly pre-COVID was very much on the lips of everybody, and I'm sure that will come again. Farmers may themselves be subject to carbon orbits or carbon tax, but then if they are, then it is more than likely that other businesses will. And one diversification opportunity may be that actually the farm and the land asset can be used as a natural resource bank for those to offset for those businesses, both for carbon and also importantly for water as well, water storage and sort of flood prevention. And one thing I would say at the moment is, although there is talk of the new environmental, the ELM scheme coming out and being piloted as of next year, it is a reminder that the Countryside Stewardship Scheme is still going to be alive for the next few years. And my personal opinion is that that farmers should be looking to get into a scheme whilst they know what is what it's all about, what they can get paid, and what they can sort of get capital grants for. So I would urge anybody to sort of consider going into countryside stewardship now or within the next year, as opposed to just wait and see what comes out in due course. You know, renewables historically have played a big part in diversification opportunities, and as I said previously, the sort of early 2010s, there was this huge rush to sort of implement particularly solar and to a lesser extent wind and AD plants on farms. That was all backed by sort of very generous subsidy regimes, which have now of course ended. Technology development has moved on since that time, and certainly solar is looking like it's coming back onto the radar, especially in conjunction with sort of battery storage, but generally in smaller schemes, and it's also very much subject to the sort of the electricity network and where there are pockets of opportunities to connect into the grid. But the network generally is still playing catch up, so it isn't something that's sort of widely available to all. That said, sort of on-farm energy generation and use of sort of farm buildings is a potential quick win. Government support at the moment is very much focused on energy efficiency. Only today they've announced the launch of a £3 billion home improvement or energy improvement scheme, and I think that's where the focus is going to lie for the foreseeable future. So when to implement a diversification opportunity, that's the sort of big question. My advice, quite simply, is you've got to be thinking about it now. We're transitioning away from the basic payment scheme up until 2028, but that could run down very quickly, and there needs to be alternative income streams to fill that void on most farms. I think most people will know that it's a very high percentage of farmers, 30 to 40%, who rely on basic payment scheme income and countryside stewardship income to make a profit. So when that is certainly when the BPS side of it is removed, that is going to put a lot of businesses under pressure unless they are looking at alternative options to generate income. And the ELMS scheme will look to encourage public goods, but there is still a dearth of information as to how farmers will be able to sort of implement and benefit from any payments that looks to implement. In short, I would say don't wait and see what happens, because if you do, it'll be too late. You've got to be thinking about it now and starting to plan. And also, sort of assets of the farm have to increasingly pay their way and make sure that they're being utilised effectively. So how to do it? What I've sort of done in the following slides is just given some rundown of the sort of stepwise approach that I would take when sort of developing the idea. So once you've sort of done the matrix and sort of decided what are the projects for you, how do you take it on from there? And firstly, in terms of sort of project development or idea development, the most crucial one is market research, doing proper market research. Is there evidence of a market demand for your product, whatever that may be? You may have been approached by somebody, but has that approach been backed up by other people? Has there been a sort of clear reason why you are looking to do what you are doing? What or where is the nearest competition? Who else is operating in the same space? And ask yourself, if there isn't any competition locally, is that for a reason? put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, and would they be looking to use your goods or services in your locality? And also at this stage, don't be afraid to get a professional opinion, be that a market research company, farm business consultants like ourselves or another. As soon as you can get professionals on board to assist, it will only help later down the line with things like funding, especially with going to banks, so that they can be satisfied that you've taken the right approach at the right time and done the right things. How do you go about funding it? It's sometimes $1 million question. The first and most important thing I would always say is do a business plan. Have a business plan from the start. You should all have a business plan for your farming business anyhow. It doesn't matter if as the concept and the plans evolved, the business plan evolves, but if you don't have one, then you're sort of feeling in the dark to a certain extent. Have a business plan from word go, and that will hold you in good stead as plans develop. Also, do an investment appraisal. You're going to be investing and spending money on this project. You want to know that both that you're going to see a return on your time and money. And I say time because I think that's a very important thing, and it's sometimes overlooked on farms, that actually your time spent invested in this is time you're not sort of spent on other parts of the business, and you need to make sure that sort of that time is money, and that you're earning something out of it. You may be in a lucky enough position to be able to fund the project from the business, or you may have to go to sort of traditional lenders and banks for borrowing. And can you service that? It's important that you know the risks right from the outset, and are confident that you have the means and ability to service the debt all the way through. And also, do you have a good relationship with your bank? At the moment, money is relatively cheap to borrow, but that isn't necessarily always the case. Bank managers are very particular in wanting to know that you have the track record and the ability to deliver on what you're planning, and that's another crucial reason why doing a business plan and having that market research behind you is a good demonstration that you have the ability to sort of essentially look after their money. And also, consider what grant funding opportunities may be available. Unfortunately, as we've sort of come to the end of the European rural development pots of money, that those applications are closed to new applicants at the current time. There may be some sort of little windows that open on a short-term basis if those existing pots of money are not spent up, but I think that's unlikely for larger scale diversification projects. There is a general expectation that some of the funds from BPS will be reallocated towards projects to support the rural economy and public goods, but they're very much up in the air at the moment. Obviously, the economy is going to take a huge hit from COVID, and that may drastically alter what can even be available. But it's important to keep an eye open for what sort of opportunities may exist. If they do open on sort of similar grounds to they have been, as the sort of infrastructure would suggest, then sort of funding opportunities of up to 40% may be possible. The one thing I would say as well is that where there is clearly a diversification project that is designed at sort of public and charitable endeavours, be it education facilities for the community, they sometimes can receive funding over 40%, and some of those pots are still available today. A lot of for example, the landfill grants are still available for community-led projects, and they may be something that you would consider on your farm, if only to bring the public to the farm, and then gives you the opportunity to implement something else on a commercial basis on the back of that. In terms of sort of property planning, it's inevitable that most diversification projects will require planning permission of some sort. As I previously said, highways and access is a potential showstopper. So actually very early in your sort of planning stage, look at whether the sort of existing or proposed access is sufficient for what you intend to use it for. If you need to get pre-planning advice, that is always money well spent when it comes to diversification projects, and getting the local planning authority on board at an early stage. In terms of the planning regulations, often sort of agricultural buildings can be converted to alternative uses under general permitted development rights, provided it's not sort of drastically altering the building or its footprint. For example, agricultural buildings can be converted to office and industrial, light industrial uses without needing to go down the full planning route. And one of the key benefits of that is it means that there is not the same level of scrutiny by other statutory consultees, such as the parish council, such as even the highways officer of the council. So it is often a sort of quicker and lighter way to gain planning permission. And in sort of recent weeks, we've sort of had some very broad announcements by Boris Johnson about sort of releasing the planning system slightly to get the country building. It may be that some of the planning rules will benefit agricultural buildings as well. Certainly, if you've had buildings that have in the past been used for commercial uses, it looks like they will be able to be also converted to residential uses without the need for the sort of full planning process as well. So, but we're still waiting for some sort of further clarity on that as and when the government sort of make further announcements. In terms of the sort of project plan, this is sort of once you've got planning permission and then actually sort of implementing the development of the project, set out a plan of when you think the project is ready to launch, to be at launch stage. Have contingency plans, both financially, so weather related, and I know it's very difficult to sort of plan for pandemics, but as this last 6 months have shown, things can crop up. So have those contingency plans in place. The last thing you want to be doing is announcing a launch and then not being able to go through with it because there have been delays or overruns. It sort of puts you on the back foot very early on into the process, and you know you then sort of may struggle to recover for some time. And then sort of finally, in terms of the promotion and marketing, it's always important, and I'd say sort of even in the market research stage, to identify your target audience and their priorities really before you sort of make the sort of details of the project public, and sort of have yourself a sort of brand strategy and stick to it as well. And by this I mean not just for the product or the service that you're offering, but also a brand around your farming business as well. Build the story of how your how this project has come about. It's always you know, a good selling point to sell to the customer the idea that you're have been in the area for a long time, that your sort of family are third, fourth generation. Those sorts of stories always sort of resonate well with the general public. One thing that is vitally important, I think, nowadays is to make sure you have a working and up-to-date website and at least one social media platform, if not more. You lose any credibility if somebody goes onto your website and the last update was from 2014. Make sure it's fresh and updated regularly. And social media is, obviously the more instant way to engage with your potential customer base. Also be consistent with the posts and communicate your brand values, and constantly be reviewing your content. Is it sort of chiming with the feelings of the day? And we'd also suggest that sort of investing in social media advertising is actually money well spent. It is where people see things. We all sort of look on Facebook on our smartphones every evening. We don't necessarily trawl the internet anymore. So 62% of online marketing spend is now on social media advertising. And although it is a minefield, it is certainly something that needs sort of priority of focus. And finally, just a sort of a blatant plug as to why I'm sort of sat here talking to you. As I said at the start, we can offer whole project support from concept stage to delivery, and then in every step of the way, including market research and initial scoping, business appraisals and funding applications thereafter, the planning, development and project management, and then sort of finally the PR and marketing, both pre and post the launch, and ongoing bookkeeping and website maintenance where that should be necessary. And we're more than happy to sort of have a no obligation chat through with you on discussions at an early stage and sort of bat some ideas around with you. I'd now sort of like to open the floor to some questions, and thank you very much for listening.